right, thank you everyone for coming out here today. I'd like to just get started by acknowledging that we are meeting on the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, whose lands were never ceded, and nor was their sovereignty. I would also like to acknowledge all First Nations communities around the continent, and also acknowledge the ongoing and continuous harm that colonisation causes through the social security system. And particularly, I'd like to highlight the fact that today, where we are on the lawns of Parliament, behind us, Andrew Forrest, whose wealth, significant wealth, has been through the theft of lands, and he is given a seat at the table to decide the future for not only millions across the continent, but also large swathes of First Nations communities, and particularly through the violence of the cashless debit card. So we're meeting here today because we were excluded. We're excluded from the Jobs and Skills Summit. And not only were we excluded, we were denied a permit from meeting out the front here and hosting a picnic where we could come together and discuss like we are now and share our stories for the media and for politicians and for any other business or unions who decide to come here. But the main reason that we are here is to highlight the fact that payments are still criminally below the poverty line, and that this low payment is a form of social murder tied with the mutual obligation system, which indiscriminately harms the poorest and most vulnerable in our community. Instead of including us and acknowledging the harms of the payments and the mutual obligation systems, they're finding ways to push people into bullshit work in order to sacrifice them for the economy and the budget. And it's just not going to work. We already know that through mutual obligations, like Work for the Dole, people die. We know Josh Park Fing, we remember him every day for the work that he has done, but he is not the only one. Other people, some unnamed and plenty who are named, have died as a result of forced labour programs like Work for the Dole. Sorry.
Oh God, sorry.
So this performance behind us does absolutely nothing. Nothing for the lives of people who are going homeless and who are starving as a result of the government's negligence and criminal activity of social murder. They're doing nothing to address it, and they've said then that they're not going to do anything to address it. It's just wildly unacceptable. So what we're going to do now is we're going to hear some stories from the people who are unable to be here today because Parliamentary Services denied them to share their voice with us here today. So, where's the first one? All right, so we're going to hear first from Grace.
Just also a content warning on some of what we're going to say, folks. There'll be some references to self-harm and suicide. Grace says, we need robust employment laws that protect employees and gives them a fair go. We need safe, steady employment that pays enough to comfortably meet living costs. We need a system that genuinely looks after all the nation's vulnerable when they fall upon hard times. How can we do this? Bring back secure work opportunities with rights and conditions that support and protect workers. Ensure a fair probation process that employers are legally obliged to uphold from the time an employee commences work. Include underperformance allegations from managers as grounds for bullying and harassment. Strengthen laws around providing reasonable adjustments for those with disabilities. Shift the power balance by making employers legally obligated to tell them their rights. Give employees a say and comply with robust, fair processes that protect employees. Ensure that these laws can be enforceable through a genuinely independent industrial umpire. A robust social welfare system that can easily be accessed when people fall upon hard times and are in ongoing vulnerable circumstances. Successive governments need to stop giving reckless tax concessions to huge multinationals and big business. Stop giving large mining consortiums uninterrupted power supply. Start governing in the interests of the majority population.
I'd also just like to mention that some of these names have been changed for anonymity reasons. And also we'll hear from Angela.
I am on JobSeeker going through the strenuous process of applying for the carer payment. Every time someone asks, "Are you in work?" I hate saying no. Centrelink doesn't take into consideration that many full-time carers are disabled people themselves who are not on the disability pension, such as myself. I have been an unpaid carer for 22 years. Just because my labour is unpaid doesn't mean I'm not a worker. The whole DSP application process is daunting and humiliating. I wish I could attend TAFE or university. Sorry guys, I just can't see. I wish I could attend TAFE or university, but I face significant financial barriers. I feel I have a lot to offer, but my circumstances are stacked against me, including a lack of accessible public transport in my area. I absolutely cannot read this, sorry, the sun is really getting me. I don't drive due to my condition and I have to rely heavily on others. There is no financial support from the government for me. I cannot organise Uber or a taxi to transport myself, even to the train station. I feel ostracised from society because I am disabled and unemployed. Most of my time is spent on unpaid labour for my family and as a carer. The government doesn't recognise my valuable contribution because it is not a contribution to the economy.
Thank you. And David?
And this is from a person who's a survivor of significant assault, so a huge trigger warning on this story. David says, "In the last 4 years, I've acted on suicidal thoughts a total of 54 times. I was already struggling before I experienced half a year of further abuse. I now experience memory loss as a result. If I had payments above the poverty line, I would have a better chance of escaping. If I had a payment above the poverty line, I wouldn't rely on a victim's claim to purchase basic needs weeks after escaping. If I had a payment above the poverty line, I would have more support in being able to live my best life. That is the right of every person. If I had a payment above the poverty line, this life might be worth living. I ask my one and only question, will you commit to raising pensions and people out of poverty? Because I am one story out of many, and I will not be the last."
And that's Ray's story and also some comments as well.
Ray is 55 years old and has been insecurely employed for decades. Despite holding a bachelor's degree in science, loyal union membership within construction and cleaning industries, and a passion to do meaningful work he is proud of, Ray has been failed by every layer of our society and government. This year, Ray was sent to an unsafe job that bullied him and underpaid him, and his provider didn't care. When he fled his home due to domestic violence, Centrelink denied him a crisis payment because he'd saved up just $2,000 in liquid assets to use for a rainy day. Ray is still currently living in crisis accommodation, still trying to make things work out for himself without any meaningful support from the government. Ray says, "My main barriers would be my age and the lack of specific skills for a job in a certain area. I'd say that along with my other barriers, job search providers are also a barrier to employment. For-profit job search providers do nothing to help the unemployed or underemployed. They simply want to make money out of them via dodgy jobs and work for the dole. At the moment, both major parties seem to believe that punishing the unemployed or underemployed, in my case, is going to help us. I want to be helped, not punished."
Thank you. And Miranda?
Most workloads beyond entry level are calibrated for a full-timer. Even if your employer is willing to let you vary the hours in theory, in practice there's just too much stuff to do, and that is not sustainable for me, especially in the long term.
And Ben?
I want to move out of my family home. I want to discover myself. I want to meet people and maybe even start a family with someone special. And I want to find a job I can really say I enjoy, secure in the knowledge that I won't become homeless due to physical limitations I have no control over. I don't want to die sad and alone, never doing anything with my life. And I don't plan to without a fight. But unless Australia changes to better support the needs of the unemployed and disabled Australians like me, I may never find the chance to live a happy and healthy life that I deserve. I want Australia to start to become the country of opportunity that it promises to be.
No one wants to hire an aging, chronically ill person who can barely stand up with an ever-increasing work history gap. My health declined specifically due to the low payment level. All I want is the pay rate increase to where I can afford to look after myself, to get my health conditions managed to a point that I can maybe get some kind of office job or something where I can sit down while working. I want to work more than anything, but I just feel like I am never even given a chance, not even a chance to feel any hope. The punishment from this system is unnecessary. I think I have suffered enough. I think we all have.
And Gemma.
I'm a former solutions and enterprise IT architect with more than 20 years in IT. Having to cope with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD has left me traumatized and broken. My barriers to paid work include transphobia. They include a lack of flexibility around work location and work hours. Flexible work arrangements would better accommodate my ADHD, which I can't get a formal diagnosis for because the medical profession is trash and I can't afford the out-of-pocket expense. I want employers to move to a 30-hour work week. Compulsory succession and advancement planning for every workplace would be great. If an employee doesn't want to pursue advancement, then they should be able to opt out. But career progression should be the default setting. Mandate a minimum of 50 training hours per full-time equivalent staff member each year for people's current roles, plus 50 hours training for future advancement. We should also have free TAFE and uni for everyone.
These are just some of the stories, right? There are thousands and thousands of people experiencing this harm and trauma via the low rate of poverty payments and the mutual obligation system. These are just some of the stories that people in this place didn't want to hear from today. They wanted to fly billionaires over. They didn't want to hear from us at all. Not only were we banned from being in that room, they also tried to ban us from having a protest so we could bring some of these people here to share their stories. This whole week has been a farce. This week started with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese labelling welfare recipients a burden. Next day, Minister of Social Services Amanda Rishworth got up and confirmed that there'd be no job seeker raise in the next budget. The next day, Tony Burke confirmed to us in person that he would not abolish Work for the Dole or any other mutual obligation program that we know is continuing to cause untold harm, continuing to kill people, as well as drive down conditions for everyone in the labour market. This jobs summit behind us is a complete farce. It's not dealing with the reality of unemployed people, it's trying to sweep the trauma and the misery that this government's unnecessarily inflicting on people under the rug. And part of the reason why we're here today is to not let them get away with that.
I'm a former high school teacher with an acquired disability, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, due to occupational violence that occurred within my workplace. Like many disabled people, particularly women in Australia, I am unable to access the disability support payment due to the punitive partner income test. This makes me completely financially dependent on my loved ones and denies me a life of dignity.
My name's Kristen O'Connell. I'm from the Anti-Poverty Centre. I'm a disability support pensioner and I am very capable of work, but work does not accommodate me. I spend my time supporting other folks who are living in poverty, and every single week I'm contacted by people who are so traumatised by the social security system that they feel their only choice is suicide, or they are being driven to self-harm. We worked very hard to get a voice inside that place over these 2 days, because we know that unemployed people are the most important stakeholders in an employment summit and in employment policy. We have the solutions. We should be full participants in that place. There should not be tokenistic inclusion of people telling their experience without having the chance to provide input about what those solutions should be. So we have a lot of proposals for government. I would urge them to pull their heads out of their asses, stop getting obsessed with all of the millionaires and billionaires in there who really don't know anything about what it's like to be a real worker, and listen to us.
Alright, thank you very much for not only sharing the stories, but also sharing your thoughts. It's hard to see that anything good can come out of this summit. It's hard to see that things will change as a result of this summit. So all we can do is to continue to show up each day, to continue fighting and railing against the oppressive powers that the state has in order to brutalize some of the poorest in our society. It works to continue that poverty because it benefits from that poverty. Sally Sinclair from the National Employment Services Agency is in that room there today. An industry that is so parasitic that it relies on poverty and oppression and death. This cannot go on. We will turn up every day and continue fighting against this for as long as we have to. Go for it.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing about full employment, because there is an obsession by media and politicians at the moment with full employment, and full employment is risky. At the moment, the vast majority of people who are trying to survive on payments are disabled, and being forced into farm labour, being coerced into free labour programs through the social security system is going to cause even more harm to physical and mental health than has already been done. So we really need to see people starting to talk about poverty and mutual obligations as a barrier to work, as we've heard here, and talk about the fact that it is unacceptable in this context to be actually saying that the number one thing we need to do is plug gaps in the labour market with people who are relying on social security. We need a supportive safety net, and it needs to be focused on safety, not on propping up businesses that aren't willing to treat people fairly and safely.
All right. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out.